Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about the evolutionary and holographic nature of holographic breathing. And we are going to address this and work with this in the next online seminar, which is on Thursday, the 15th of February. And I will leave a link in the description below. So if anybody wants to join this seminar, they can. You can be anywhere in the world and just join in, because it's on Zoom, which is a platform for webinars. So that is there, and we will be addressing the evolutionary and holographic side of holographic breathing. And many people think of holographic breathing as a technique. But for me, my experience and understanding of holographic breathing is that it is not a technique. That when you start learning the inner workings, energies, and geometry of holographic breathing, that it is an evolution, that something starts that is more than you were doing before, that a whole system of and matrices of energies and structures open through the whole body that were not there before, but are there within us, within every cell. It's not like something is coming from the outside and you're doing it, or you're trying to change something. It is there in every strand of DNA, waiting to wake up. And when we start doing holographic breathing, these different things start waking up. And I'm going to explain a bit about that now, and we will be going into it in depth and experiencing it. Participants will be experiencing it for themselves. There is a system of yin-yangs kind of pulling and opening in different directions when you start doing holographic breathing. That is instigated from the beginning. And there is a particular one in the throat, the trachea, the chest, and the lungs, and also the pleura, the fluid around the lungs and the ribs, and then also relating through the diaphragm and the abdomen. There's a very particular way that this works. It doesn't just all open up together. It's a bit like it pulls in different directions. And this works in a very particular way that it doesn't work in our normal breathing. Now, I can't explain it all here. We'll go into that in the seminar. It takes a little while to understand it, but that starts working. Now, we will work with it and feel it, and I will explain what's happening there so people understand that particular yin-yang. When we're doing holographic breathing, that starts working, and the ribs can do a much bigger breath, the whole lungs, the pleura, the diaphragm can do a much bigger breath than the diaphragm. And when you look at it in a particular way, that it is actually working. I'll show how it physiologically works with holographic breathing. It opens up the breath manyfold, and it releases a substantial amount of energy and clears through the whole body and the brain and the whole system. And when we're doing that, if we go back to our normal breathing with the jaw not moving, this stops. This whole yin-yang effect that starts in holographic breathing, when we go back to our normal breathing, it stops. And it is much more to do with the breath coming in through the nose into the lungs, opening the lungs, and emanating around there, and there's the prana of the breath, and then that spreads through the whole body, which is great. But something else comes into play in holographic breathing, and the breath, when you're breathing with a normal breath, you can feel the lungs open, as if you can feel the breath opening, and the lungs are made of breath, and then this energy can spread through the whole body. But with holographic breathing, you can feel that, but you can also feel the substance of the lungs, the material of the lungs, the movement of the jaw contacts you to the motion within the cells, in the body, in the lungs, and you can feel the different ways it's working, and it opens up a different dynamic, and then that works in a very particular way through the abdomen and through the whole body, and it instigates, so I bring my other hand up, it instigates, I'll bring them back, here we go, on the in-breath a shortening top to bottom through the whole body, and on the out-breath a lengthening. So that's counterproductive to how we experience our breathing through the nose breath. You feel this experience of it expanding in all directions. But there is that in holographic breathing, but there's this very structural thing of it condensing top to bottom on the in-breath, and this produces the sideways motion everywhere through every cell that is we normally experience as the in-breath, as an opening. But to actually experience that in holographic breathing, you get this shortening that produces the opening, which I talk about in different lectures and actually show how that works. Like in the abdomen, we experience it expanding in all directions, but actually for that expansion to happen in the abdomen, the diaphragm is dropping and the pelvic diaphragm is slightly lifting. It's a muscular pull down, and that produces the open. We don't experience the top to bottom because it's hard to experience a contraction on the in-breath. It impinges on the in-breath, but there's ways of seeing and feeling this in holographic breathing, that slight contraction actually gives the impetus for everything to open. So we become fully aware of this in holographic breathing. And that particular motion is to do with the mouth and the jaw. The breath through the nose is much more to do with the air. The mouth and breath is the movement, the strength, the potency, the hara. And it can also come up through the eyes, which is a different energy again. Now, for me, when we worked a lot, I did a whole series on suckling, womb life, birth, and going back to creation. And it's very clear to me and to people who I was teaching that in the womb there's this very much contraction top to bottom and opening sideways on the in-breath. On the out-breath, contracting laterally and lengthening long ways. You can feel that. Now, there is no air. You know, we're in our bubble, our sac and our fluid. And so we're not really breathing the air, though can breathe the fluid there. But the breath carries on. And for me, the breath the baby uses in the womb, right back to those initial cells, are doing in-breath, out-breath. Because it's contained. It can't just all open in one direction. For it to expand sideways, it's got to contract top to bottom. So right down to every cell is doing that. And then as the baby grows in the womb, it becomes a more whole body thing. It's contracting top to bottom so that all the cells can expand. And this helps everything grow, everything form, the brain, the evolution of the body through its whole journey in the womb. And then through birth, you've got this top to bottom. This baby is being squeezed top to bottom. That is encouraging it to expand laterally, the contractions are an in-breath. And then when the baby, and also the diaphragm of the mother coming down, the baby is coming in line with the mother's breath, because this is a contraction of the baby top to bottom, because it's up against, the diaphragm is affecting the baby as it comes down, encouraging a sideways expansion of the baby. And then when the baby comes out, it comes on the nipple, and breastfeeding, it's very similar to holographic breathing, the motion of the mouth. And for me, then, the baby's using this motion of holographic breathing to realign after birth, after it's being born. And it's integrating it with breathing the air. And I show how the movement of the jaw really instigates the breath in the lungs. And at that stage, when the baby is first born and it's coming on the breath needs to be instigated. So it's starting this new journey, and that instigates the breath, and suddenly there's this breath coming through the nose. And with breastfeeding, there's both. There's the motion in holographic breathing and the breath through the nose. And in holographic breathing, we can have both. You can have the motion of the jaw and this functional thing that happens through the whole body. And at the same time, you can have the breath coming through the nose. We can do both. We don't have to have one or the other. But if the jaw stops, then this whole motion of that first type of breathing, the holographic breathing, disappears. So there's the energy of the mouth and the jaw, there's the energy of the air and the sinuses. You come up to the eyes, this is much more to do with the neural tissue in the brain. These are all different facets to holographic breathing. This will light up the whole eyes, the ethmoid, the third eye, the whole brain when it rises through there. So you can be in the motion in the mouth. You can be in the energy of the breath in the sinuses and nasal passageways. Relates to the lungs. The jaw relates to the abdomen, the eyes, the head and brain. So for me, one of the things that happens, I think happens, that the baby starts doing both. And I've talked to mothers who've learned holographic breathing and said, yeah, my baby does holographic breathing. And when it's on the breast, it's doing holographic breathing. And I think as the baby ages, this disappears off, and it just becomes the breath through the nose. And we become used to that. This motion disappears. But this motion comes from creation. That's where it started, where these first cells in the womb connected to creation were doing. Contracting one way so they can expand the other way. It's a form of breath. It connects to creation. And as that happens, it very strongly, because the brain as well, it works that way. Contracting top to bottom, expanding sideways on the in-breath, lengthening top to bottom, contracting sideways on the out-breath. And that disappears as we get older, and it just becomes the breath through the nose. And the question is why? Because this whole form of breathing so aligns the whole body, so builds our immune system, activates all the growth and evolution through the womb. Why would you want to lose that? Incredible healing in that. So I don't see it as a technique. I see it as more, as an evolution. And one of the reasons I think it stops is as the identity develops, as the mind develops, I think the holographic side of it drops away. Because that whole mechanism of the mind mind and the intellect, I see them as kind of different things, are housed in the brain. And there's a certain point in people's spiritual evolution where the energy reaches the head. Now, in people's evolution, that's happening kind of every so often, and it goes through the brain and you get a big light. But there's a certain point where it just starts going through the head and it just doesn't turn off. And people quite often think of that as an enlightening experience or kundalini rising. And that is kind of it. It's a different life for that person. It happened to me. Well, it was a different life for me anyway. It happened for me about 5 years ago. And it was like you walk into a new room and you can't actually go back to the old room. Because as it goes through the brain, you can't hold the structures of the intellect anymore. You can't hold the structures of the mind anymore, because there becomes this natural motion of it, and it connects to the earth and it connects to the higher self, which isn't how you perceive yourself, which isn't what you have built up as this framework through the years. And I think as that forms, holographic breathing drops away, because the brain moves in holographic breathing. The energies rise through the spine and through the brain in holographic breathing. When we become aware of the eyes in holographic breathing, it relates to the energies of the brain. And once that is going, we can't be there in the same way. Maybe little bits, which is the best way of learning, lots of little bits of those. You don't want it just all to go. Until you get used to that and you can get longer stretches. So for me, holographic breathing is truly an evolution, is not a technique as far as I'm concerned. For me, it is more than our normal breath. And I teach it in layers, and it's like it is in every cell. So I teach a certain dynamic, which is, first of all, I teach the holographic breathing, and that opens something in people which they can have all the time. And each step of the way, I bring people's awareness to a certain dynamic, to a certain principle. And once we've worked with it and they've practiced it, suddenly it's awake, and it doesn't make it more complicated. It makes it easier, it makes it more whole, it makes it more profound, it makes it more deep. So in this next seminar, I will be teaching these yin-yang through the chest, through the trachea, through the throat, through the tongue, through the whole face, through the abdomen. And every so often we will stop the jaw moving. And you'll notice that it stops. This whole function of it, this whole physical modality of it, being able to be aware of the cells, being able to be aware of the motion of the cells, disappears, and it becomes just the air, the prana, and the energy of the air. And then what I do is, we take people into these dynamics. We have the motion of holographic breathing, we have the energy of holographic breathing. But to start off with people, that is just to do with the mouth, because they are focusing on the jaw. And then I teach people how to do the motion of the jaw and bring in the energies through the sinuses, through the nose. There's a particular way of doing that to open up the lungs. So you get both. You get the movement and this happening in all directions, and just the expansion of the energies of the breath happening at the same time. So you get this working together. So I'm not saying you stop doing your normal breathing. You start with holographic breathing and you add that to it, but the jaw keeps going. And then this opens up through the eyes, and that gives a different layer to it. And when that all starts to align, again, these are different initiations, different ways of working it. Then when they're all aligned and working together, because the eyes relate to the brain, the ethmoid in the middle relates to the brain and the energies in the cranial fluid. And then when they are all working in conjunction, see, there's a potency from the mouth and jaw, from the lower energies, from the pelvis, from the sexual energies. When this is all working together, that rises up, becomes through the emotion, feeling, through the eyes, the intellect and the connection. When they align, then you get this energy coming out the top of the head and going home. So for me, holographic breathing is an evolution. Not only with it in itself, that it opens up all these paradigms of how we can heal. Think about it, in the womb, you weren't just healing, you were growing. The cells of the brain were growing. The cells of the body are growing, they're forming, they're perfect, or pretty perfect anyway. And then as we get older, they seem to, even though none of them are older than 7 years, everything ages. And we've got all this DNA that apparently doesn't work for some reason. So rather than when we come to just the breath through the nose and the development of the mind and the ego, that doesn't have to be the end. We can bring in something that is there, asleep within us. An incredible healing, multifaceted system. And I can't say I know it all. I've been doing my best to document this now since, I think it was 2002, 2003 when it came through. I'm sure that it just goes on forever. But for me, there is truly the possibility of evolution from holographic breathing to every cell, to our spiritual consciousness, to the connection to beyond in all sorts of ways, and the connection to the earth in all sorts of ways. It is holographic. It is the same patterns over and over through everything, through the whole universe. And we become part of something bigger. And we actually start to work. It's a bit like the human race, to me, doesn't seem to work properly. We seem to go around, you know, destroying everything for greed and money and possessions and whatever these things we all want. It's as long as I'm all right, I'll fight for this. We destroy the earth. We destroy the very thing we're living on. We pollute the waters. We fill the food with all sorts of rubbish and cruelty, and something isn't really quite right there. We do need to evolve. And I may be totally wrong. And there are probably loads of other things doing a similar thing at this moment. But boy, do we need some kind of evolution at the minute. And I'm teaching it in the next seminar on the 15th. Click on the bottom and there'll be a repeat of this a bit later as well. So come along, join in the seminar, get enthused, learn how we are truly an evolutionary being that doesn't have to just stay as we are, caught in all of these circles. Now, I'm not saying I'm beyond, or I've done it, or I'm there. But I'm on the journey and I'm documenting it as best I can, and I'm teaching it as best I can. And I video all of these seminars now, and I make them as downloads, so they're there and will be there after I've gone, so this won't become lost. But it's just a great thing to be there. This is the first time that I'm going to teach this particular seminar, so it's a bit like it landing on Earth. And you can be part of that. So come along, enjoy this seminar. Get involved with your own evolution. Okay, that's me signing out. I hope you enjoy this video, and thank you for listening.